The Accidental Hero in the Moldy Hat. Once upon a fairly dusty laboratory in London in the year 1928, there lived a Scottish bacteriologist named Alexander Fleming. Now, Fleming was not the sort of scientist who marched around with polished shoes, a thunderous voice, and a laboratory so clean it made the furniture nervous. No. Fleming's lab at St. Mary's Hospital had the cheerful disorder of a place where important thoughts regularly bumped into dirty glassware. There were Petri dishes stacked like tiny glass pancakes. There were bottles with serious labels and mysterious liquids. There were notes, stains, burners, pipettes, and the faint smell of science having forgotten to wash its hands. Fleming himself was quiet, sharp-eyed, and wonderfully observant. He had the kind of face that looked as if it was always listening. If most people saw a messy bench, Fleming saw a crime scene. If most people saw a spoiled experiment, Fleming saw a whisper from the universe saying, "Psst, look closer." One day, before leaving on holiday, Fleming had been studying Staphylococcus bacteria. These little troublemakers were round, golden colonies that gathered on agar plates like tiny smug villages. They caused infections, and they were very pleased with themselves about it. Fleming left some of these plates in his lab, and then he went away. This is where the story becomes deliciously ridiculous, because one of the greatest medical discoveries in history began with what was basically poor housekeeping. While Fleming was gone, a mold spore floated in. Perhaps through a window, perhaps on a breeze, perhaps wearing a tiny cape. We do not know. But it landed on one of the Petri dishes and began to grow. When Fleming returned, he found what most scientists would have called a disaster. There on the plate was a patch of blue-green mold, soft and fuzzy-looking, like a microscopic old gentleman's beard. Around it, something strange had happened. The bacteria nearby had vanished. Not politely moved away, not taken a short holiday. Gone. Around the mold was a clear ring, a clean little halo where the mighty Staphylococcus colonies had simply failed to survive. Imagine Fleming standing there, holding the dish up to the light. The glass was cool in his hand. The agar inside glowed faintly amber. The mold sat in the middle like an uninvited guest at dinner, and around it was silence. Most people might have said, "Ugh," and thrown it away. Fleming said, more or less, "That's funny." And thank goodness for people who say, "That's funny," instead of "into the bin with you." He studied the mold and realized it was producing something that killed bacteria. The mold belonged to the Penicillium family, so Fleming named the mysterious bacteria-killing substance Penicillin. Penicillin was not flashy. It did not arrive with trumpets. It arrived as mold. A humble, fuzzy, slightly embarrassing mold, standing in a dirty dish like it had just wandered in and saved civilization by accident. But the story was not finished. Fleming had discovered penicillin, yes, but turning it into a useful medicine was another mountain entirely. Penicillin was delicate, difficult to grow, hard to purify, and generally behaved like a brilliant guest who refuses to give anyone their address. Years later, at Oxford, scientists Howard Florey, Ernst Chain, and Norman Heatley took up the challenge. They were determined, clever, and probably very tired. Their lab became a strange little factory of hope. They grew penicillin in whatever containers they could find, including bedpans. Scientific glamour, ladies and gentlemen. Heatley designed clever methods to extract the precious substance. Chain brought biochemical firepower. Florey organized the effort with the steady determination of a man trying to push a grand piano uphill during a rainstorm. Slowly, painfully, they learned how to produce enough penicillin to test it. And then came the astonishing part. It worked. Infections that had once been deadly could suddenly be treated. Wounds that might have taken lives began to heal. During World War II, penicillin became one of medicine's great miracles, saving soldiers and civilians alike. So the discovery of penicillin was not a single lightning bolt. It was more like a very odd parade. First came Fleming, the observant Scotsman, peering at a moldy dish and refusing to ignore it.
Then came the mold, blue-green and fuzzy, accidentally magnificent. Then came the bacteria, who had been enjoying themselves until the mold ruined their afternoon. Then came Florey, Chain, and Healy, wrestling the discovery into a medicine with patience, ingenuity, and containers no one expected to see in a heroic tale. And at the center of it all was a Petri dish, small, round, ordinary, and messy. A little glass stage where one of the most important dramas in medical history quietly performed itself. The moral? Sometimes greatness enters through the window, lands in your experiment, goes a fuzzy hat, and waits for someone curious enough to notice.